Midnight encounter. It was a chilly autumn night when I found myself at the entrance of the eerie old hospital. My heart raced as I walked through the dimly lit corridors, the soft hum of the flickering lights providing little comfort. I had come to visit my dear friend who was a patient here, and though I tried to muster courage, the unsettling atmosphere of the hospital was hard to ignore. My friend's room was on the 3rd floor, and I braved the creaking elevator to get there. The hospital seemed to sigh with every floor I passed, as if it held a secret it was reluctant to share. I tried to shrug off my unease, convincing myself my fear was irrational. After all, hospitals were supposed to be places of healing, not hauntings. As I reached my friend's room, the sight of her frail figure in the hospital bed brought a sense of relief. I wasn't alone in this strange place. We chatted for a while, trying to keep the conversation light. But the looming midnight hour weighed on me. My friend's eyelids grew heavy, and it was clear she needed rest. I promised to stay a little longer before saying my goodbyes. With a hesitant smile, I left her room, stepping out into the dimly lit corridor again. The nurses had long retreated to their stations, leaving the hallway deserted and eerily quiet. A shiver ran down my spine, and I picked up my pace, hoping to reach the elevator as quickly as possible. The clock on the wall struck midnight, its chime resonating through the corridor. My heart raced, and I quickened my steps, glancing around nervously. That's when I saw her, a shadowy figure standing at the far end of the hallway. My breath caught in my throat, and I froze in place. The figure was transparent, its form flickering like a static image on an old TV screen. As I stood there, rooted to the spot, the figure started to move towards me, its steps making no sound on the linoleum floor. Panic surged through me, and I fumbled for my phone, desperately trying to turn on the flashlight. But as the light pierced the darkness, the figure disappeared. My heart pounded in my chest, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I quickly turned and fled in the direction of the elevator, not daring to look back. The elevator doors seemed to take an eternity to open, and when they finally did, I practically leaped inside. I mashed the button for the ground floor, my fingers trembling with fear. The elevator descended slowly, the silence only broken by the sound of my own ragged breaths. As the doors finally opened onto the ground floor, I stumbled out, my legs carrying me to the hospital's entrance as fast as they could. The cold night air hit me like a welcome shock, and I took deep, calming breaths. Looking back at the hospital, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had truly encountered something otherworldly. Captive whispers of the departed. In the haunting aftermath of the accident, my life had been shattered. Alone in that hospital room, I fought to recover from both the physical and emotional trauma. The pain was a constant reminder of what I had lost. My boyfriend, my love, my everything. His absence weighed heavily on me, a darkness I couldn't escape. As the days bled into nights, something changed. In the pale moonlight that filtered through the window, I saw him. His form was faint at first, a mere flicker in the corner of my eye. I blinked, thinking my mind was playing tricks on me. But there he stood, more real than I could have imagined, dressed in the clothes he wore on that ill-fated night. He looked just as he had before the crash. Bloodstains adorned his shirt, a cruel reminder of the tragedy. His eyes, once vibrant and full of life, held an otherworldly sadness, a yearning that tugged at my very soul. At first, I convinced myself it was a hallucination, born from grief and pain. But every night he returned. His presence was undeniable, his desperation palpable. He never spoke, but his eyes implored me to understand something beyond the grave. My heart raced, the fine line between reality and the supernatural blurring. One night, as I lay there, he beckoned me with a trembling hand. Goosebumps prickled my skin, and a mixture of fear and curiosity coursed through me. Could it really be him? Was he trying to communicate? I summoned the courage to speak, my voice quivering. "What do you want?" I whispered, the words barely escaping my lips. His gaze bore into me, a mixture of sorrow and urgency. It was as if he had a message, something he needed me to know. One fateful night, his presence grew stronger, the boundary between our worlds weakening. His outstretched hand seemed so tangible, as if I could actually touch him. The room grew cold, the air thick with an otherworldly energy. I could feel him reaching out to me, his silent plea echoing in the depths of my mind. Tears welled in my eyes as I considered his offer. Could I leave everything behind? Could I leave the world of the living and journey into the unknown? The pain of his absence had been unbearable, and the prospect of being reunited with him was undeniably tempting. With a heavy heart, I shook my head, tears streaming down my face. His expression twisted, a mixture of anguish and acceptance. The room seemed to tremble, his form growing fainter by the second. And then he was gone, his presence, his desperation, all fading into the darkness. As the room returned to its silent stillness, I knew I had made the right choice. It wasn't about rejecting him. It was about choosing life, honoring his memory by living the life we had planned together. Haunting beneath the bed. I'm just a regular nurse, and I've seen a lot of things during my time working at the hospital. But nothing, absolutely nothing, could have prepared me for what I experienced that night. I still get shivers down my spine whenever I think about it. It was a chilly autumn evening, and the hospital was quieter than usual. I was assigned to the night shift tending to a patient named Mr. Thompson. He was an elderly man with a frail body and a weak heart. His room was dimly lit, with the soft glow of monitors casting eerie shadows on the walls. I had just finished administering his medication and was checking his vitals when I heard a faint rustling sound coming from under the bed. At first, I brushed it off as my imagination, thinking it was just the old building settling. But then the sound persisted, growing louder and more distinct with each passing second. My heart began to race, and a cold sweat formed on my forehead. I knelt down and peered under the bed, half expecting to find a stray cat or some misplaced object causing the noise. But what I saw made my blood run cold. There, in the dim light, was a figure. A pale, translucent figure of a woman. Her eyes were hollow and empty, and her hair seemed to float around her as if suspended in water. She was staring right at me, and a feeling of pure dread washed over me. I stumbled back, my breath catching in my throat. My mind raced, trying to find a logical explanation, but nothing made sense. This was no trick of the light, no mere hallucination brought on by exhaustion. She was real as the fear pulsating through my veins. But as I explained the situation to my colleagues, their expressions shifted from concern to skepticism. They chalked it up to stress, lack of sleep, and the spooky atmosphere of the hospital at night. No one believed me, and I began to doubt myself too. The rest of the night was a blur, and I couldn't wait for the sun to rise. As my shift ended, I hesitated before passing by Mr. Thompson's room. I took a deep breath and peeked inside, half expecting to see the apparition again. But the room was quiet, and Mr. Thompson was sleeping peacefully. I left the hospital that morning, my mind still haunted by the image of the ghostly woman under the bed. To this day, I can't shake the feeling that what I saw was real, that there was something otherworldly in that hospital room. And every time I step into a dimly lit room, A shiver runs down my spine, and I can't help but glance nervously towards the space beneath the bed.